Shalawam, 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 Yasharahla, Shabbat, Shalawam. All praises be unto thee, O Yahweh, Bahasham, Mashiach, Yahweh. So, Yasharahla, upon having conversations, sometimes a brother or a sister may speak in term where it seems to suggest that these laws, statutes, and commandments was handed down from the Most High via Moses unto the children of Israel for the very first time when they were in the wilderness. However, scriptures allude to in multiple different places that these laws has been established from the very beginning. And what do I mean from the beginning? I'll expound upon that a little bit more as we go through the lesson. So what we want to do is go to chapter 7, 27, and I'll read through to verse 29 to start the lesson. Again, the lesson is, did man have these laws, the laws of God, from the beginning? So Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 27, Israel. And I will go through to verse 29. So 27 reads, Behold, this have I found, saith the preacher, counting one by one to find out their count. Verse 28. Which yet my soul seeketh, but I find not. One man among 1,000 have I found, but a woman among all those have I not found. Verse 29. Lo, this only have I found, that God has made man upright, but they have sought many inventions. Now that is going into the inventions, it's their own ideas. You know, this is where idolatry stems from. This is where it all comes from. We leaning onto our own understanding. The verse above, lo, this only have I found, that God has made man upright. That suggests to be upright, suggests to be walking in the laws of the Most High. This is what make you upright. So it is being suggested here that the Most High created man. He made man upright. But due to the invention, seeking of their own inventions, most likely they will have gone off. But we're going to prove that point. Let's leave Ecclesiastes and go to Apocrypha, and we can have a look at Wisdom of Solomon chapter 14, and we want verse 12. So that's Wisdom of Solomon chapter 14 and verse 12. For the devising of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication, and the invention of them the corruption of life. So that backs up what I was saying earlier in regards to their own invention. It just leads to idolatry, it leads to all sorts of things. I'll read that one more time, Israel. Wisdom of Solomon chapter 14 verse 12. For the devising of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication, and the invention of them the corruption of life. Okay, let's go from there. Stay in the Apocrypha, Israel. We want to get 2nd Esdras 9 and verse 18. Second Esdras chapter 9 and verse 18, and we'll go through to verse 20, Israel. Verse 18. And now, when I prepared the world, which was not yet made, even for them to dwell in, that now live, no man spake against me. No man spake against the Most High God once he created man. Again, like I said, I'll expound a little bit on it when it says he made man. But for now, it suggests here that from man was created, again, he was upright. Why was he upright? Because no one spake or spoke against the Most High. This means everything was in line, decently and in order. Okay, now that we have understood this, let's go to the beginning, so to speak. We'll go to Genesis and we'll have a look at chapter 2 and verse 7. And Genesis chapter 2 and 7 reads, And Yahweh, God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. This here is, so to speak, going into man being created from the dust, and the breath of life was breathed into him, into his nostril, and he became a living soul. To not deviate too much from the lesson, what I can say about this verse is the dust represents a low state in some parts, because as you know, the meaning is different in some parts of the scriptures when certain words are used. It just depends on the context. Okay? So in this instance, man was made from the dust and the breath of life was breathed into him. Again, as I said, I don't want to deviate too much, but that breath is the law, statutes, and commandments. That's what it is. But again, that's for another lesson. But bear that in mind, what I just said anyhow with Israel. So from Genesis, we want to go to Isaiah chapter 26 and 5. Isaiah chapter 26, and we want verse 5, Israel. For he bringeth down them that dwell on high. For he bringeth down them that dwell on high. The lofty city, he layeth it low. He layeth it low, even to the ground. He bringeth it even to the dust. So again, like I was trying to explain earlier on, it just depends on the context. So you must know the context and know what's exactly being said. For example, here now, dust. From what we have read, this is talking about, for example, something being totally destroyed and being brought low. That's dust. It's been destroyed. It's brought down to nothing, to naught. As well as the scripture could say, the Most High bringeth man from out of the dust and put him on high. That would be saying, again, it took him from a low estate, possibly a place of confusion, and has brought him high and made him wise. It goes into all these things. But again, context, context, context. So I'll read that one more time, Israel. Isaiah chapter 26 and 5. For he bringeth down them that dwell on high, the lofty city. He layeth it low, he layeth it low, even to the ground. He bringeth it even to the dust. And from there, Israel, we want 1 Kings chapter 16, and we go to verse 1. We'll start off at the top. So that's 1 Kings chapter 16 and verse 1. And it reads, Israel. Then the word of Yahweh came to Jehu, the son of Hanani, against Baasha, saying, For as much as I exalt thee out of the dust, and made thee prince over my people Israel, and thou hast walked in the way of Jeroboam, and hast made my people Israel to sin, to provoke me to anger with their sins. So again, it's going back into what I was trying to explain earlier about dust being a low estate. Dust, depending on the context, could be even confusion. And yet dust still comes to mean the dirt itself. So again, context, context, context. Again, I'll read that again, Yasharahla, just for edification's sake. So it is 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 1, and I'll go through to verse 2. Then the word of the Yahweh came to Jehu, the son of Hanani, against Baasha, saying, For as much as I exalted thee out of the dust, and made thee prince over my people Israel, so he's brought him from a low estate to a high estate. And thou hast walked in the way of Jeroboam, and hast made my people Israel to sin and provoked me to anger. So the Most High raised him up and he just went off and, no good. So Israel, from 1 Kings, we want to go back into the Apocrypha and we want Wisdom of Solomon, and we go back into chapter 7. So that's Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7 and 24 to 26. Slakia Israel. Wisdom chapter 7, 24. From there, Israel, it says, For wisdom is more moving than any motion. She passeth and goeth through all things by reason of her pureness. I'll go through to verse 26 also, Israel. Verse 25. For she is the breath of the power of God. Think back to Genesis, Israel, when the breath of life was breathed into the nostrils of Adam. So I'll read that verse again. Verse 25. For she is the breath of the power and the pure influence flowing from the glory of the Almighty. Therefore can no defiled thing fall into her. Verse 26. For she is the brightness of the everlasting light and the unspotted mirror of the power of God and the image of his goodness. That's very beautiful. That is beautiful there, because it says a lot. It says a lot. So from there, Israel, since we've established what the breath is, so from there, we want to go to Genesis again, Israel, because we're tying it all off, and we want 2 and 15. So that's Genesis chapter 2 and 15. In verse 15. And Yahweh God took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Right? So this man got the breath of life, and God took him and placed him in the Garden of Eden. Right? So there's something happening here. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into it because that's for another class. But I'll read it again and bear in mind what was read from the previous verse. Now, Genesis chapter 2 and 15. And Yahweh, God, took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. Now we go back into Wisdom of Solomon and we say we want chapter 10 and we want verse 1. So that's Wisdom of Solomon chapter 10 and verse 1, and we'll go through to verse 2. Verse 1. She preserved the first formed father of the world. The first formed father, it's referring to Adam. So, which is the same man that was just placed into the garden, which is the same man that just had that breath breathed into his nostrils. So from verse 1. She preserved the first formed father of the world that was created alone and brought him out of his fall and gave him power to rule all things. Where does this power comes from? Okay, let's go further, Israel. So now we want Ezekiel chapter 31 and 3. Ezekiel chapter 31 and verse 3, Israel. And I'll go through to verse 9. There's a lot in here. Behold, the Assyrian was a cedar in Lebanon. Behold, the Assyrian was a cedar in Lebanon, with fair branches, and with a shadowing shroud, and of a high stature, and his top was among the thick boughs. Verse 4. The waters made him great, the deep set him up on high, with her rivers running round about his plains, and sent out her little rivers unto the trees of the field. Now what we want to show here, Israel, is people are the trees being spoken of here. Nations are the trees that are being spoken of here. I'll go over it a little bit more. I'll go over it from verse 3 again to verse 4, and I'll point a few things out. Behold, the Assyrian was a cedar in Lebanon, with fair branches. Cedar is a tree and it's got branches. And with shadowing shroud, and of a high stature, tall. And his top, it's not talking about a tree. It's a person. It's a people. And his top was among the thick boughs. The waters made him great, the deep set him up on high, with her rivers running round about his plants, and sent out her little rivers unto all trees of the field. So we're talking about wisdom here. There's a lot of wisdom here, and we already know what the water is, like when I went through the baptism class, washing of the word. So we know we're talking about the words of God here. I'll read again, Israel. I'll start from verse 5. Therefore his height was exalted above all trees of the field. His height above all the trees of the field. You see it clearly, Israel. And his boughs were multiplied, and his branches became long because of the multitude of waters when he shot forth. All the fowls of heaven made their nest in his boughs, and under his branches did all the beasts of the field bring forth their young, and under his shadow dwelt all great nations. So you see, everything that is talking about here, it's people. And I want to explain that this is actually talking about Adam. And we're talking about the Garden of Eden. So it's clear there was a whole lot of people there. But I digress. That's for another class, as I was saying. But I'll read that again, verse 6. All the fowls of heaven made their nest in his boughs, and under his branches did all the beasts of the field bring forth their young, and under the shadow dwelt all great nations. Verse 7. Thus was he fair in his greatness, in the length of his branches, for his foot was by great waters. I have made him fair by the multitude of branches, so that all the trees of Eden, the people, the nations of Eden that were in the garden of God envied him. So Adam was envied. You see, so again, I'll read that. That's verse 9. I have made him fair by the multitude of his branches, so that all the trees of Eden that were in the garden of God envied him. Adam was not in the garden alone. There was a lot of people in the garden. So from there, Yasharahla, from Ezekiel, we want to go to Psalms chapter 1. Let's go to Psalms chapter 1. And we want Psalms chapter 1 and 3. And it reads, and he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. Remember all that water that was running around all them trees? Yeah, that water, that knowledge, that wisdom, them laws. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. All praises be unto the Most High Yahweh, Bahasham, Amashiach Yahushai. So Israel, I want to close out now, Israel, with this last one, because we've made the point. Again, we have made the point, Yasharahla. So we want Deuteronomy chapter 4 and 8. So that's Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 8. And it reads, and what nation is there so great that has statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law, which I set before you this day? So yes, Yasharahla, these laws was already in place from our father Adam. The Most High handed them all down to Moses, but they were already established. For as you know, Abraham, our father, kept the law. So Yasharahla, I bid you, Yasharahla, I bid you farewell until the next lesson. So enjoy your Shabbat, Israel. Shalawam.